Hi, I'm Ahmed Shawky, the Chief Executive of LevelUp ESG. Welcome to a new episode of the LevelUp ESG podcast. In recent years, ESG controllership and assurance have become increasingly critical areas of focus for organizations globally. Today, we have the privilege of exploring these important areas with a distinguished expert in the field, Deepa Rao. Deepa is the ESG Governance Lead at Cognizant, a global leader in technology and consulting services. Deepa spreadheads their ESG governance efforts, ensuring alignment with the global frameworks like GRI, SASB, TCFD, and others, while maintaining compliance with emerging regulations like CSRD and SEC. Deepa, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So let's dive right into this fascinating conversation. Deepa, I would love to start with your personal journey. Could you please tell us about your fascinating transition from internal audit and corporate governance to ESG and what your current role entails?
Sure. So I am a career internal auditor. I always used to think in terms of internal audit, internal controls, risk management, and business processes. 4 years back, I made my transition with the existing skill sets that I had around internal controls and audit into ESG. So it was exciting and nervousness also because I knew half of my work, which is, oh, yes, I can do internal controls over data. I can make sure the data is accurate because that was my main job description of making sure the data is accurate, making sure there are internal controls over that data. But the other piece that I was not very familiar with is the ESG aspect of it.
Hmm.
Right. For me, I started burning the midnight oil, basically thinking about what GRI is, going through those requirements and frameworks. And I'm talking about 2020, 2021, right? That time we knew there was a regulation coming in, but there was absolutely nothing in the horizon of what it could be and how large that scaling would be. But I think when I came in, I started at least familiarizing myself with a lot of ESG specific aspects, and then it went from there. Um, so right now, my role is more about a global role where I'm looking or I support ESG governance, and I'm also reporting on these, which means that I look at what are the requirements around all the different frameworks and see if we have the right information to add in or include in the report. So that's my main role.
Fascinating. I remember our days at PwC where, and the
Yeah.
great job that you're doing in internal audit and internal control, really. And I have no doubt that you're doing even a more fantastic job in your ESG role at Cognizant. That's really fantastic. So, looking at the broader landscape, how would you describe the current state of ESG and where do you see corporate sustainability heading for in the 2025? We're almost just a month away.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine. We are almost there. Um, so how companies are dealing with now is they are, first of all, I think most of the companies, at least large companies, have voluntary reporting. They have certain metrics in place, especially when it comes to climate. They are approved by SBTI, that is Science Based Target Initiatives. They have all these targets that they're trying to report on and show progress. But these are the bare minimum, right? Also, they are following GRIs and SASBs, TCFDs, which is great, but it's just a fraction of what is required. So
Mm.
now companies are trying to see the transition between a voluntary reporting to a regulatory landscape, which is not easy. It needs a lot of structure and more of a structure and governance around this. And this is where companies are trying to get the best out of what they think the regulations are and how they can make sense out of it. It's also the skill set right? It's not just a requirement that they are dealing with, it's also the skill sets that they require. They need to fill these positions to make sure they are going through the regulatory landscape in the way and shape and form they need to. So that's another thing, trying to understand what the data is, how they need to report it, and who will report it. These are the main things that I think companies are dealing with.
That's great. So a move from voluntary to regulatory focused actions, limited skill sets, data and technology. So that's fascinating. Um, that was, I think, somehow you addressed a question I have. How do you think companies are grappling with the transition to a more compliance-driven sustainability globally, especially, the move from voluntary to regulatory requirements, the limited skill sets and ownership challenges, and also grappling the bridging gaps between the current and required reporting and the fragmentation in the fragmentation in terms of um, technology use, the tools that's available that has, I've seen organizations like using one organization using 11 different tools. So I'd
Yeah,
love to learn from your experience about those topics in more details.
yeah, sure. So let's start with the actually what is material to organizations, okay? And then we touch upon all these aspects that you spoke about. So the first thing is when you have voluntary reporting, you have very limited data sets that you are working on. Then it goes to actually regulations where they ask for double materiality, I think is a big aspect here. Obviously, all organizations, and there's so many vast topics that need to be reported on, and not everything is material for everybody. So there needs to be a double materiality assessment that needs to be done, right? So, first of all, understanding what your key topics are. Secondly, trying to get technology to help you with this and the governance aspects. So let's touch upon the governance aspects right now. So what's happening is normally the sustainability teams are doing these reporting. But when it comes to the same rigor from how the financial reporting is
Mm,
done, that's when the magic begins,
mm.
because it's so difficult to get this rigor in such short notice. It's there's so much to cover.
Do you think it is a time challenge or is the complexity challenge or lack of resources?
All of it. All of
All of
it.
it. All of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Um, all right. You
Because see,
mentioned,
when it
yeah.
comes to the time, right? When it comes to the time, uh, if you see right now, not many companies really have already done a gap analysis. Not many companies already have policies and procedures over some data that they need to report. Not all companies have still established a group that will take care of this reporting. So when you onboard these people, let's say by 2025, there are some companies who are on wave two who have
Hmm.
to report in 2026, looking back in 2025. That's when you are it's we are already December, right? Tomorrow is
Yeah, yeah.
December for us. So imagine transitioning these teams and starting with scratch just to make sure you know what you need to work on, to get these new resources, to get technology in place, to understand who the stakeholders are. By the time you get through this, you already into the reporting phase, unless you have a good team to really take all these in parallel.
Deepa, I think you unpacked the multiple important points, but I would like to go to the point about how can we achieve the rigor we achieved in financial reporting, in ESG reporting, in ESG data management and reporting? Because as you know, according to statistics now, like according to the European Commission report, over 42% of green claims are misleading, and over 40% of organizations are greenwashing. And the greenwashing could happen due to could happen intentionally or unintentionally. And that's mainly due to inaccurate information. So, in your opinion, how can we achieve that rigor for more credible, trusted ESG data?
Sure. So yes, I can relate to this, right? When companies started issuing their ESG data sets first, it was more of a marketing gimmick, right? It was more the data that you just get and you publish it. But now, since the regulations may need to make sure the data is accurate, reliable, complete, internal controls over that data is the key aspect of it, right? Ensuring that you have proper documentation to back your metrics and data sets, and ensuring that you have all these documentations in one folder, making sure they're accurate and you've tested them. And that is the key. So when it comes to internal controls, what companies need to do is, first of all, have an inventory of what are the key metrics that you need to report on. It goes back to my double materiality assessment,
Mhm.
where you identify your key aspects or key topics that you need to cover.
Material topics, yeah.
Start with that first. Have internal controls around that. And how do you go about internal controls? Is companies should involve their internal controls team, or we are also largely seeing ESG controllers responsible for internal controls, right? So
Mhm.
first, once you have an inventory of all the key inventories or all the key metrics, you need to prioritize and see which ones is the most relevant first. Let's say climate. Um, Human rights, ethics and compliance. These are data security, data privacy. These are all important topics. I think almost every company will need to report on. Start with those. When you start with those, is basically have a nice blueprint of um, of where to start and who to connect with. Identify your stakeholders, understand what their process is in following or collecting this data, collating this data. What are the systems that they're using? Do they rely on the system as well, right? Do they have, suppose if there's a third party system, do they have a SOC report for those, right? There are so many important questions that needs to be answered before you have or before you understand the process that they currently have. Then you do a gap analysis to make sure if there is a proper controls environment around that particular um, data set. And then when you know that you know the flow grows properly, you know the right people at the right level are looking at the information, the right people are approving it, the data sets that are coming in are complete, accurate, have a good sense of ensuring that the period is being covered. That's when you have a good documentation. When you have a good documentation, that's what you need to make sure you get confidence in the data. So this is that internal control aspect, which is so key, that is required for these reporting. And
Perfect.
obviously, through this process, you need to make sure you have good documentation and all these evidences are retained, because that's important for assurance and internal audit.
Great. Engage with your stakeholders, identify your material topics, gain control over your data, and document throughout the process. That's a great summary. Deepa, I would love to, if you can share with us some of the top challenges that you face in your role. Are those technology related, data related, people related? So, I'd love to learn from you what are the top challenges that you're facing, or others, not just you specifically, but also what you
Yeah,
see your peers facing.
Sure. I think I'll start with the most key one is the stakeholder expectations as well, right? When it comes to financial reporting, I know a lot of stakeholders already know how the data needs to be. What is the relevance of accurate data? What is the relevance of having the right data in the system or anywhere really? But when it comes to ESG reporting, the stakeholders are so different. These are facility managers. We are talking about HR. We're talking about ethics and compliance. We're talking about data security and privacy, who are not exposed to audit or they're not exposed to any kind of um, they are exposed to processes, but making sure, accurate, complete, reliable information, checking their data, that is something that stakeholders are struggling with nowadays. Um, it's also they also feel it's coming out of their day job, and that's why I encourage companies to add this in the job description, where stakeholders are now involved in providing data for ESG reporting. So stakeholder ownership, because this is a collaborative effort, right? You cannot do it on your own. And me sitting in ESG team, I would say I'm a second line of defense when it
Mm.
comes to collecting the data. So the onus is mostly on stakeholders, and stakeholder management is one big aspect that you have to tackle with. Secondly, the data itself. The data that you receive is fragmented, it's all over the place. I also heard around 8,000 hours annually are going in data collection for companies. So this is huge,
Yeah, yeah,
and a lot of resources, like around 600 plus
yes,
k
yeah,
in dollar value, is going
yeah,
towards this data collection processes, which includes technology, which includes people.
yeah. It's 677,000. I've seen the ESG today. I just reported $677,000 are
Yeah.
spent just annually on resources to collect data, to collect ESG and the carbon data. Um, that's fascinating. I just there was a concept you used. You are the second line of defense. I like to call it
Yeah.
lines of success
Yes.
because we are really supporting organization success, especially in an impactful role like yours. You are at the heart of impact and success. So just sharing my views on that. Um,
Yeah. No,
uh,
absolutely. Yeah.
Speaking of the three lines, and you mentioned this is collaborative efforts. How do you collaborate? What tools do you use to collaborate with your colleagues across the organization? How many tools do you use on that space?
Oh, yeah, we use a lot, and I'm going to even lose count, right? We use a lot of tools. So it's not just a ESG tool itself that directly the ESG team uses. We use one tool for data collection when it comes to carbon accounting, collecting the data and calculating the data. We use one tool for reporting the data, which gets all the information in one place and report the data. Again, governance around this data sets and technologies is very important. But not just this, there are also other systems that we rely on to get our data, which also forms part of the ecosystem of this whole ESG data, right? So let's say data from electricity that obviously sits in in a carbon accounting. Let's say data from HR, headcount, data from ethics and compliance. All these sit in different um, systems that could or could not be integrated. And that is key, right? You need minimal manual intervention. You need to make sure that the data that's flowing from one system to the other, one upstream and downstream system, is well connected. And you also ensure that there are no slip ups in the integration process. So, this is very key for us. We use three systems. To At least from my end, we use three systems from our
Yeah,
friends,
yeah,
and obviously we have 20
yeah,
to support us,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I
So
also
it's
heard that a lot of
over
companies
23.
are use, yeah. a lot of companies are using at least 11
Yeah.
systems,
Yeah. Yeah.
fragmented systems to do one job. And I feel it, and I feel it's yes for now, because not all technologies as mature. There are very few technologies that we have today for ESG which can do an end-to-end process. And that's what is required, right from materiality assessment to reporting. You can complement it with other systems. It no size, one size doesn't fit all. You need to make sure that those technologies fit for your purpose.
Thank you. I think you really summarized that well. Two more questions before we conclude. One
Sure.
is, do you get third-party assurance and audits in your reporting?
Yes, yes. So we do. We've done that for the last 4 years. We have our third party assurance who kind of do an annual review of all our data sets. It's all limited assurance now, but I know soon we have to transition into reasonable assurance. So we have that. We also have internal auditors who look at our information before the assurance auditors looks at it. So internal auditors cover more of S and G aspects and controls over E aspects, and then our assurance providers looks at the E aspects for now. That is the environmental aspects. So that's how we've kind of put that through. It's a huge giant. Like assurance is huge, and you need to be prepared for it.
Sounds great. And you need to use the right technology,
Yes,
like Level Up ESG
technology is very
platform.
important. Yes,
Very important.
technology, because the way you give confidence to the assurance providers, who then pass on the confidence and trust to the stakeholders, is through a good, robust system. So if your system is nice and robust, uh, you can work on more of the strategic aspects rather than thinking of, oh, how is this data going to be correct, or how do we ensure governance is in place. So
I believe
technology
you,
is
absolutely. I believe you'd agree with me that our platform is robust enough and cutting edge. Uh, so,
absolutely. I've seen it, and I think
thank
it,
you.
it covers a good amount of governance, right? And it can be tailored to everyone else. So I'm really proud of what your team
Thank
has
you.
done, and it's
Thank you
really
so
done something
much for
great.
your support. And you sparked this journey. I remember our chat last year following, my PhD research when I shared the results with you, and I told you now I'm turning that into a business plan. You were really the spark of that journey. So thank you so much. I'm obliged for your efforts and support throughout. So Deepa, as we wrap up, so what final thoughts would you like to share with the audience? That and now the space is yours.
Yeah. So if you've not already started, start now. It's important. It's okay to not be perfect in the first time. Go slow and steady. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to have a good blueprint and draw those lines, put those dots, draw those lines. Then you start coloring in, right? Like it's the way kids learn how to draw and make a good art. So I'm using that analogy just to the way I look at it is put those dots, put join those dots together, make it a nice good blueprint, and then color it, and then you can shade it, you can put your thing, but go very slow. Also make sure there are two important aspects of it. One is technology. Technology plays, it's an enhancer. It plays a very important role to get a lot of your activity off your back, right?
Mm,
That's important that you
totally.
have the right technology. Please make sure you have informed decisions of what technology you're using that fits for your purpose. Not every if a large technology, a large company that has great technology may fit for your company, but it is not good. They may not fit for other purposes, right? So make that informed decision and use SMEs. It's very important. When I say SMEs, I'm talking about subject matter experts,
Mhm.
because first time around, like double materiality assessment, gap assessment, making sure you have the right policies, actions, targets, metrics, all these are key information that you need to have, key documentation. And you may not have, or you, when I say you as a sustainability or ESG controllership, because this is new space, you may not have knowledge of everything. SMEs, although they are also exploring and learning with you, right? But even SMEs, because they have a wider client base, maybe they will be able to learn from others and help you as well. So it's important. So for me, start now, start as soon as possible. Make sure you have an ownership for who will take care of this CSRD or regulatory compliance world, right? Because I say CSRD because CSRD is coming first, and then everything will just back it up, right?
Yeah.
If you cover CSRD, you cover a lot already, so it's fine. So make sure you have proper governance around the CSRD reporting. Technology is a great enabler, and don't be shy of using SMEs or subject matter experts, because it will make a lot more easier. One advice, this is my personal opinion, is if you have course sourcing SMEs, it's much better because you're also learning along with them. So an outsider may not know everything. So if you do a course sourcing kind of engagement, I
Co-create,
think it's very
co-collaborate.
valuable. Yeah.
That's very valuable. It has been very valuable, Deepa. It has been a pleasure again hosting you today and working with you and learning from you and supporting you on the journey. Again, thank you so much. And yeah, to another episode.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Yeah,
so much,
bye.
Dr. Ahmad.